Our speaker is Benjamin Perrier, who is a postdoctoral fellow with the Borders and Globalization program. It's a research program at the Center for Global Studies, which I manage, and we have some of our other postdocs here and graduate students, so welcome. Thank you all for coming. Benjamin is a postdoc student with us, but he's doing his PhD at the University of Geneva, and he has a legal background, and he's studying the postmodern border. Was that close?
Yeah, very good.
Pretty good. He's a jurist interested in the theory of law, cross-border law, transnational law, and global law. So I'll turn the floor over to Ben. We do our seminars in this room so people can visit from across Canada or in other places in the world, because we have partners through our research program across Canada and elsewhere. So our students can check in, or our colleagues. Our seminar series happens every other Tuesday. It's always down here. You're welcome to attend. It's open to the public. But it means that we're being filmed. And that there's somebody listening online out in the ether world. So I'll turn it over to Ben. He'll speak for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I will try.
No, he'll speak for more than 10 minutes.
Sorry for my English, huh? It's not very well.
Yeah, so he'll speak for about 45
accurate.
minutes, and then we'll have a dialogue. If you want to ask a question at any point, please do so. Ben came to UVic about 2.5 years ago?
Yeah.
3 years ago?
I couldn't speak
He couldn't
anywhere.
speak any English, and now he is...
It's still the same, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I have improved a little bit.
Anyway, so if you need a clarification or anything, please feel free to jump in, just let him know. Otherwise, Ben, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for your presence today. And the subject today is the concept of the borders over the effects of the globalizations. So I will start to speak about the BIG project, Borders and Globalization project, because it's the number 10, is the 10th seminars. The first seminar was an introduction to the border studies. After the first seminar, we have studied cultural dimension of borders, history of borders, security pre-clearance policy in the Pacific Northwest, European border regions, sustainability and borders, postmodern borders by the concept of governance. It was 2 weeks ago. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, it was full of snow, so it was deleted, but the topic was the borders inside the European Union, so we missed that. And today is the problematic of the borders over the globalizations, or we could call that global borders. So the question, and I will read the majority of my time, so I could interfere with you, of course, but forgive me for this for this lecture. So the question we are going to address today is familiar to us and to you, because it's the concept of Borders in Globalization project, led by Emmanuel Brunet-Jailly and Nicole Bitzheimer. The theme of this seminar allows us to question the effects of globalization on the border and the methods of presentation of the border. We make the following work hypothesis. We observe great disruptive and transformative effects of globalization and legal globalization on the border. Effects that lead to a complete new manner to think the borders and the boundaries. We are going to ask what are the effects of globalization, legal globalization, and global law over borders. So first of all, we could start by the presentation of the summary. It is a little bit dense, like you could see, but so we will we will speak about the legal characteristics of the international society. I think is necessary to understand the transformation, the current transformation. We need to spend 2 or 3 minutes about this legal characteristics of the international society. After that, we are going to speak about legal characteristics of modern borders. Then globalization, what is it, what it means, global law, etc. And I will speak about some examples like Lex Mercatoria. It's the global merchant law. And of course, this global merchant law is completely overlapping the territories and the borders of the states. We will speak a little bit about internet law and data protection, and we will speak about algorithms, law and the power of the GAFA. And in conclusion, I will justify the postmodern method approach for analyzing the borders in globalization. So the subject of the borders in globalization is related to the changing role of the state in contemporary international society that is dominated by the phenomenon of globalization. Even there are tendencies to renationalization. But today a state can no longer live in isolation. So traditionally the state characterized by its sovereignty establishes norms which impose themselves on the recipient, qualified as subject of the international law. But the increased geographical mobility of economic operators, especially in the establishment of their economic activities, whose choice is facilitated by the progress of communications and the growing immateriality of products, allows them to choose the state rules to approve them. So we could notice in the globalization the competition of norms, competition of legal system, and competition of legal orders. Let's look at some legal global phenomenon who are transforming the concept of borders, the concept of territoriality of the borders. So we could notice the global finance. Global finance is, of course, a big network around the world who is playing with borders and the differences between states. We have the Lex Mercatoria, like I said, is the global merchant law. We have also the Lex Sportiva. Lex Sportiva is the global law of sports, who is managed by the CIO. Do you know the CIO is the Olympic International Committee? It's just an association based in Switzerland, but this association is the legal authority for the sports, for the Olympic sports around the world. We have also the GAFA, you know perfectly, Google, Amazon, Facebook, etc., Microsoft. And of course, like other global phenomenon, you have also some environmental issues. We could remember the nuclear accident of Chernobyl, who crossed the borders, of course. And for 10 years, we could notice this cryptocurrencies movement with this Bitcoin. The Bitcoin it's a virtual money who is using the blockchain technology, and blockchain technology is a network of computers around the world, of course, and in this case also the borders are not very important. The territorial borders of states are not very important. That's one effect. That's global phenomena who impact directly the significations of territorial borders. And I have news last week. You remember 1 year ago, Facebook was impacted by the Cambridge Analytica scandal. So this British analyst firm has managed to get behind the scenes on 87 million personal data of Facebook users. And after a year of mea culpa, punctuated by new massive data leaks, Facebook did again a big mistake last week. A Wall Street Journal said 2.3 billions of users, the user of Facebook lost their data. Yeah, lost their data. It was a second scandal just last week. With the same problem of some application in Facebook who could steal your data indirectly. That's a global phenomenon problem because it impacts you directly in your human rights, in your private rights. So I have the story of the Bitcoin just in order to launch this seminar. So the Bitcoin has an ancestor. It was the B-money in 1998. This B-money was created by Wei Day, and he wrote that 20 years ago. My motivation for B-money was to allow online savings that are purely voluntary to exist on their own, so they could not be taxed or regulated by the threat of force. So it was 20 years ago, so it's an old process. And 10 years ago, this famous Satoshi Nakamoto, it's a mysterious guy. No one knows who is this guy, Satoshi Nakamoto. And he wrote a paper in October 2008 with this title, A Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash System. You could find online this article. And I would share with you this first phrase of the abstract, which is very important to understand the impact of globalization, the impact of this technology around the world. So the abstract said, a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. So with this technology of blockchain and this technology of virtual money like a Bitcoin, we could notice the states, the territory of the states, the institutional power of the states are completely bypassed. And I think bypassing is the main concept for understanding in practice what is globalization. Globalization is bypassing all the modern words and all the modern categories we used to use for 500 years. And today or yesterday, I don't remember, but in Warren Buffett, in an interview, he highlighted the potential of blockchain technology, but he criticized the Bitcoin. For Warren Buffett, Warren Buffett is the famous owner of multinational companies of media, etc. Exactly. And he said cryptocurrency has no unique value, it's only an illusion. So it was just an aperitif for starting this seminar. Now we are going in the deep analysis of the society of this international society today. And this international society is structured with key concepts like the concept of the state, the concept of sovereignty, the concept of territory, the concept of international public law, who is more than a concept, of course, but these five concepts on the screen are very important for understanding the international society. And everyone still live in this international society. So what is it, a state? I repeat, and it's important to understand the international society today in order to understand the transformation of this international society. So that's why I will speak a little bit about these 5 or 6 concepts. completely symbolic of the modern thinking. So the state, of course, is a legal construction, is invention, is a political and legal construction, but is also a reality. And as a reality, state is appeared before the international law. But as a legal phenomenon, the state constitutes the international law and it proceeds from this international law. That's maybe technical, but the state is just a creature of the international law, but international law is also the creature of the different states. Okay. So the definition, the more simple of definition of the state, is an organized and independent collectivity. And a state, in the theory of law, a state is recognized by the combination of material and immaterial elements like a population, territory, government, and international sovereignty. These four elements are the core of the theory of the state. And of course, in addition, he has what we call the international personality. It means he's the actor of the international public law, like he's the subject of this international public law. So, sovereignty, what is its sovereignty? And I will just focus on one angle who is interesting here. The summa potestas, in the Latin world, the expression is summa potestas. Sovereignty is the supremacy of the power. It's the supreme power. And this means the state in the international public law has no superior. And it means also in the internal order, the state is has the supreme power. But in international public law, it means the state is sharing the authority with other states, but at this level, all the states are equal. But inside his territory, because this concept of sovereignty, the state has this sovereignty, and the state has the supreme power inside his own territory. And the sovereignty at the international level means he has not a superior. So it's important to understand the territorial sovereignty, the sovereignty of the state inside the territory, and it's important to understand the sovereignty at the international level. It means the state has no superior. So what is the territory? The territory in the general and general legal scholar theory, it's a legal space framework where the states hold the power to determine the legal regime of each parcel. It called that dominium. I didn't put that in the screen. Huh? But territory is divided in two. You have the territory, the dominium, and you have the territory, the imperium. The dominium, what is it? Is the capacity, is the power of the state to control and to determine each parcels of the territory. This territory is a park. This territory is the city. This territory is a district. This territory is land specifically for the petroleum activities. So that's the dominium. That's the authority of the state over its territory. And the second authority is the imperium. Is the authority? It's the direct authority of the state over the people. So one authority is about the determination of the legal regimes of its territory, and the second power is the power of the state to control the people who are inside this territory. So, international relation, I don't want to focus more than that. International public law, we know what is it, is the law between the states, and also we could integrate the international organization who are also part of this international public law. So let's move on for the concept of the borders. So when the law speaks of a state border, it always speaks of legal construction of the border. It means that that the legal frontier or legal border or legal boundaries exist only like a legal construction. And of course, globalization affects the borders of the states. In 2 points, it's acceleration of the movement of the goods, of the people, and more than the acceleration is also the growth of the cross-border mobilities. So of course it doesn't match. You have the territorial borders, and you have the globalization with the theory of the movement around the world, and you have the territorial border with completely the fixed concept. So we could understand simply the mismatch between that. So in my view, in my opinion, we could distinguish two kind of borders. For me, the borders is the border of the state. I speak like a legal scholar, so for me, the border is the boundary line. So that's the boundary line of the states, okay? And we could distinguish two kind of borders. We could distinguish the legal part. The territorial border, it means the territorial limit. It's the boundary lines, who has the function of delimitation, the delimitation of the territory from the Canada to USA is the legal territorial border. And the signification of these boundary lines is to be a limit. But you could think also more theoretical, with abstraction. We could, but it's just with the legal understanding. Finally, we could think the state like a set of rules, a set of regulations, and we could create a second kind of borders, and this kind of borders, this second is not only the territorial limit this time, but it's this interface between legal systems. When two countries are negotiating a treaty between them, they affect their legal systems. So it means one state is in relation with another state. When they sign a treaty, an international treaty for managing the customs at their territorial limit, it means they impact their own identity. They impact their own legal identity. So we could distinguish this territorial limit, and all the people in this room knows what is it, this territorial limit, that like a boundary lines. But it's more important at the globalization level to understand the states like a set of regulations, and the border is just the interface of communication, of differentiation between the set of the states and the sets of other states, and the sets of the international system law, and the states of the legal the lex mercatoria dimension. And I think finally, the border of the state is a legal tool of spatial and legal differentiation. This phrase, in a nutshell, is a good synthesis of what is it, how we should understand what is border today. So of course, globalization has impacted the concept of borders, but the reality of borders, but also the legal industry by itself. Now with this technology of computing, of this network, etc., the job of the law has changed by itself. It means the law has changed by himself. If the legal scholars could create or could manage their job at home, it changed the job of the legal industry. And we could distinguish some effects. Of course, globalization demands a new kind of legal practitioner, because the legal practitioner now needs to understand a different kind of laws, the international public law, of course, but he should understand also the international commercial law, the international environmental law, the international banking law, etc., etc. So globalization is also rewriting client expectation, etc. I don't want to focus too much on this topic. So what are the legal characteristics of globalization? First of all, what is it globalization? So this is a difficult phenomenon to characterize because it's a complex movement of different factors. Globalization could be defined as a phenomenon of increased economic integration among nations, characterized by the movement of people, ideas, social customs, and products across borders. This phenomenon has a long history. I don't want to go in this history. So finally, globalization is a set of processes, dynamics, gears, and movements. A key development behind this current globalization wave is the revolution in information and communication technologies. So what are the main features of globalization? We have two movements: the openness of economic relations and cultural relations, and the growth of phenomenon of deterritorialization. The effects of globalization is deterritorialization, dezetization, and transnationality. That's the three main impacts of globalization over the law. The main features of globalization, I repeat, because of course we know the openness of borders, we know this exchange of cultural relations, etc. But we know less the growth of deterritorialization, and I will explain what is it later with the extraterritoriality. Dezetization. Why globalization is created a dezetization? It means the state is not only the major actor in the global at the global level. State shares its authority with other actors, with the private and global companies, with the public and administration, like the CIO. I told you 10 minutes ago about the Olympic International Committee. So the state is not anymore the only one authority in the global level. That's why we call that dezetization.
Excuse me, what are you saying?
De-etatization. So it means the state, the international level, is less full of the power of the state. De-etatization, it means the state is not anymore the only major actor at the global level, because it needs to share its authority with a global actors, global network actors, global administrative actors, global private networks actors. So the state is not anymore the only actor in the global level. De-etatization, it means the global level is less with state. De-statification. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
So globalization, you need to understand, although that is not above, is not a concept who is above the states. It's everywhere. It's multi-level. So it means you could find a globalization effect at the local level. You could find a globalization effect at the national level. But you could find also globalization effect of movement at the global level, at the mondial level. So globalization is not one slice with superior to the other slice. Okay, it's everywhere. It's multi-level. That's the main understanding of globalization. So globalization has horizontal effect and vertical effect, but finally globalization is transversal. It's everywhere at each level. Okay. And finally, we could make the observation. You remember this famous expression of planetary village? Village like the planet, the Earth.
Global village.
Global village, exactly, from Marshall McLuhan. And we live in this global village. Well, of course, globalization is some legal scholars thinks globalization is not new, and this globalization today is not real new. We know that at the end of the 19th century, with the first international organization, like the telecommunication, the first radio, the first TV. It was the first level. It was the first movement of globalization. But today, some other scholars say it's completely different. Why is completely different? Because you have multiple centers. The nation state has lost its power, and the computer revolution was completely new. So we could say this globalization is different than and unique than the other movements. So what are the specificities? What are the pressures of globalization over the law? We could distinguish three kind of pressures. First pressure, the tension towards the development of standards indifferent to the spatial location of the object to which they apply. Second pressure is the appearance of non-state regulators in the fields of internet standardizations. And the third pressure is the tension towards the development of transnational legal realities. So I will speak a little bit more about transnational legal realities, because it's, when we speak about globalization in law, we need to focus on the transnational phenomenon. I don't know if you have heard a little bit about transnational. What is transnational? What is the transnational law? But I will explain you a little bit later. So we have distinguished the pressures of globalization of the law, and now we could speak about the effect and three main effects of globalization on the law. The permeabilization, I don't know if it's English, but permeabilization of the legal systems. One legal system, like one state system, is completely, is not legal proof, I will say. Is not legal proof when the source of law is outside the state. We could distinguish also the competition of the legal system. Who will manage this law? Who will manage this commercial international law? It's not the states anymore, of course. Is the global private entities. And the third effects of globalization and the law, it's this movement of harmonization. So when we say harmonization of legal system, it means the Canada and the USA share the same law. So the border limit, the territorial limit of the border, what it means territorial limit if the two states are sharing the same law. So it means the territorial limit is not anymore a limit. And the second version of the border, you remember this border like interface between legal systems. It's an application of this concept of border interface. And one other effect of globalization on the law is this demultiplication of extraterritoriality. Someone knows what it means in extraterritoriality? Extraterritoriality means I will explain you, is the effect of the national law over their borders. And the state who is very competent, or even though sometimes it's illegal, but it's very, because the USA, the United States, have the power, and they did in the past a few times, to control a law outside their own territory. I will explain you here. let's extraterritoriality of law. And that's very important because globalization is accelerating this extraterritoriality movement of the law. So we have 3 cases of extraterritorial jurisdiction. The first case is when a state applies in its national territory a foreign or international law. That's the first one. The second case, I will go into details. Huh? The second case is when a state applies its national law or international law to a situation occurring in the territory of another state. And the third case is when a state applies in its territory what we could call national laws without territory. So if I could enter in the first example, we have few examples of that. Example, it could be a bilateral or multilateral treaty between states, which make the obligation to recognize the validity of an international commercial arbitration award. That's the first example I'm giving you. The second example is the European Union. In the European Union, you have 27 or 28 states who share the same legal regime, the legal regime of the European Union. When Germany is creating one product, like a car, Germany is building a car. Germany has the power to give one certificate for saying this car is completely safe. Okay, but it's at the German level. It's inside this territory. Okay, but the certification of the safety of this car, because it's inside the European Union, this certification will have an impact in France or in Italy or in Spain. Because the German car could have the authorization to be in other countries from the States, from outside Germany, okay? So European Union has created this concept of equivalence. How could we equivalence? Equivalence. So one national certification has the same effect in Germany because it's from Germany, but this certification has the same effect in other countries who are members of the European Union law. And more technically, I will give you a third example for the first case. And you will notice borders are not very accurate at this level of globalization, like I said a few times since the start. You have the example of the Japanese court of the Japanese, who is applying the Swiss contract of law for a contract between a Japanese company and a German company. So, I will repeat, 3 countries: Japanese, German, Swiss. The application, the court of Japan is able, not the court of Japan, sorry, the 2 people who are in Japan who are signing a contract, a private contract. They won't use the Japanese law. They are going to use the Swiss law. Why the Swiss law? Because the Swiss law of international commercial contract is more accurate. So we have a contract between one Japanese and one German who are using the Swiss law. That's an effect of globalization, of legal globalization. It means that this international level of commercial relation, you could choose the law you want. You could choose the law you want for writing your contract. That's a third example of this first case. The second case, it's typical the United States example. This is the example of the American law. I don't know if you knew these two laws, Helms-Burton and D'Amato, adopted by the USA in 1996. It was these two laws had this purpose. They were able to sanction some countries and some companies who were dealing with Cuba, Iran, or Libya. So it was a national law, but with extraterritorial effect. Because the companies or the state who were dealing with Cuba, Iran, they could be sanctioned by the United States. That's an example of a territorial, of the extraterritoriality of national American law. The third case of this extraterritoriality of law, I repeat, extraterritoriality of law is the main effect of globalization and the globalization of law. And this third case is the example of the Lex Mercatoria. And the Lex Mercatoria is not a national law, is not an international law because it's not between states, it's between companies. So the companies, the private companies around the world have this capacity to build their own laws for themselves. So this third case, when you have a state who applies in its territory a national law refers to this Lex Mercatoria, to this private law between global companies. In order to put in force this contract, you need to refer to a national jurisdiction. That's the third case. Let's speak with the one example of global law, global internet law. So we have noticed internet law is, and we are, all these people inside this room are victim of this internet dimension, because we have shared a lot of our data in Facebook, in Google. When you click, you have an algorithm behind you. Each one of your clicks were able to know what you prefer. You have an algorithm who are able to know where are you going to look for buying some things. And the main legal dimension is the protection of the human rights, is the protection of the personal rights of your private life. And of course, some people say the data informations is the petrol of this century. Because with the data of each one of you, I could sell you directly what I want to sell you. If you like a chocolate, the internet dimension could follow your taste, your needs, and it could also anticipate, because Google is a big network of controlling our data, and with Facebook, etc. So the purpose of the exploitation of data are very diverse. You have the recruitment. You have also the geolocation. You have also the surveillance, video surveillance. You have also the control of access, the control of schedules, the control of emails. So everything inside Google, everything inside Facebook is the capacity for this private company to be richer than us, okay? Because they could sell our data to some other companies who want to make publicity, who want to make the advertisements to you. And I don't know if you know, but in European Union last year, we have European Union has has developed one regulation for the protection of the personal data, and it went in force last year, and it's a huge level of protection of individual and personal data, but Canadian companies who are dealing with European Union, they need to respect this regulation. So it means the regulation of the protection of the personal data in European Union has an extraterritorial effect for the Canadian companies, because Canadian companies who are dealing with European Union, they need to respect this regulation of personal data. That's another example of extraterritoriality effect under the globalization movement. I will speak a little bit about this right to be forgotten. Someone knows, I know Ryan knows about this right to be forgotten. Some other people know what it means by the right to be forgotten. So I will tell you, because it's completely a new right. It's a new right from 2014. It's not completely a new right, because in France we have a national agency who were able to protect personal data, and this agency was born in 1978. So it depends the countries, but in France we have this national agency who were competent for the protection of the individual and personal data. But this judgment was named Google against Spain in 2014, creates this kind of right of to be forgotten. So I will give an example, and I will go into this example. So it was a Spanish citizen. The name of this guy is Costera Gonzalez, who in the 90s he couldn't pay back his credit. So a newspaper wrote, this Costera Gonzalez is a bad guy because he can't pay back the credit, so a bank has the right to pursue him. And it was in the newspaper. So when this Costera Gonzalez was putting his name in the Google search engine, he could find this paper of him who were real information, but it was 20 years before. So he sued the National Spain Agency, and he sued Google in order to delete the link who were referencing him with this affair, with this affair, a personal affair, and he won. He won. So it means the European Court of Justice has decided in paragraph 99. No, 99, the Costera Gonzalez has a right to the information in question relating to his person is no longer at the current stage linked to his name by a list of results displayed following a search made from his name. So he sued, he won, and Google, few weeks after this decision, Google has created a formula. If people in European Union, you don't want anymore all the information, personal information about you, I don't know, for any reasons, you have the right to fill in a formula, to send it to Google, and Google has the obligation to delete the link, of course, with some conditions, but the main principle is that. So, how could I interpret this right to be forgotten in internet dimension? I could interpret that like a reconstruction of legal borders, because Google is around the world. You have the Google.com, you have the Google.Spain, you have the Google.France. This Google network is dividing itself in national network. So the question of this Costera Gonzalez was, but I don't want to be anymore in the Google data. So delete my name, delete this information, delete this link. But Google said, but okay, I could do it. I could delete, but just in Spain. I could delete, at least because European Union with this new regulation. Okay, I don't want to make any mistake. I could delete your data in European Union, but not at the global level, so not outside. So it means a guy from Canada who is looking for, we could try if we could find any information of this Costera Gonzalez. And I think we are going to find some this famous information, but in Spain you can't, because Google, or you could, but it will be more difficult because the link, the internet link about this affair of this Costera Gonzalez won't appear in the list. So I don't know how you could find it, but it will be more difficult. But this territorial, it's important to understand the global effect of Google, but this national division and the right to be forgotten will be only in Spain and the European Union, but not in the other continents. So finally, in the global network, in the global technology like internet, you have this kind of reconstruction of legal borders, but legal borders built with this protection of human rights, protection of personal data. That's how I interpret this global border, and we are in this seminar for understanding what it could be, the evolution of borders, and I think this protection of human rights and this protection of personal data is a new kind of legal border with a territorial effect, because it's only on Spain and the European Union and not outside. And the argument, the reason of Google said, okay, I could delete your information of the Google.eu and Google.Spain, but I can't delete this information from other computers from other continents, because it could be a reduction of the freedom of expression. So the justification of Google was, okay, we could delete, we could protect your personal data where you are and where, but not outside, because outside the law of freedom of expression is more important than the personal data. So what is it if it's not a legal, functional border? For me, it's completely, we are in the core on the concept of global borders. So we have spoken a little bit about internet dimension and the protection of the human rights, the reconstruction of functional borders. But behind this technology, behind Google, behind Facebook, behind the blockchains, behind the Bitcoin, you have this global technology of algorithm. And finally, this algorithm is a technology who are able to control our lives. Why? Algorithms are becoming more and more important. They are everywhere, but invisible. And they are in your phone, they are in your computers, they are in the crossword fires, they are in the engine of your cars. And we could say, and it's not a joke, we could say algorithms produce norms. Algorithms are sources of law. And finally, if algorithms by itself are making law, where is the state? Where is the capacity of the state to make his national law, if it's just an algorithm created by Californian engineers? So what is it, an algorithm? An algorithm is a series of mathematical formulas, computer operations, and statistical processes that can be used to solve problems, perform tasks, or obtain results from large mass of data. So an algorithm works with entries and outputs. Algorithms finally are the basis of the computing science. But when you use Google or Facebook, you have an algorithm who is calculating the time the time of your clicks. They have an algorithm who could guide you before, because it knows your habit. It's connected with this international artificial intelligence. When you will use Google, when you will use Facebook, time after time, the computer will remember you. The algorithm who is following you will remember you, will remember your actions, and they could anticipate. So when one day you will receive an advertisement of, could you buy this burger in Bin 4? It means it has anticipated your volunteer. So the algorithms are controlling our lives, and it's concrete. It's completely concrete, and we are, like I said 20 minutes ago, we are victims of this power of the algorithm. So, in conclusion, and I will ask you finally, because it's the purpose of this seminar, what is it? What it means border today? What it means territorial border? What it means legal state order? Border is a limit. Border is a line. Border is a what? Where are the states? Where are the national law? Where are the border? The border as a function of protection of the state, but your rights, your human rights, your personal data, where are they? How to conciliate, and I think if you remember all these seminars we have done 10 seminars since September. We have covered a large spectrum of topic about borders, but how to conciliate the border state, how to conciliate the international public level of protection of the borders, how to conciliate theoretically the theory of border state with this phenomenon of globalization. And I think the postmodern approach that I developed and I defend in Borders in Globalization, this postmodern approach invites us to understand border by slice. We need to understand border by the national slice. Is the limit, and you remember this territorial limit is a territorial limit of the sovereignty of the state. That's one slice of the border theory. It's very important because with this border you could have these nationalities you have today. Okay, you have the second slice. It's the international public level of borders, and at this level, at the international public level, borders limit are very protected. Try one day to cross one border without papers, and you will see the reality of what I'm saying. And of course, at the worst level, it could create war, civil war, or international war between countries. And we have an example between Ukraine and Russia for the invasion of the Crimea. We have another example between Israel and Palestine. All these concepts, borders are very tangible, very real. We are in the real world. But you have the third slice of borders. The third slice is the border inside the European Union. And the fourth slice of border is the slice of the cross-border cooperation at the local level. If Victoria is dealing with Port Angeles, their neighbor, you have the boundary between states, but you have the boundary of their district, and they are neighbor. They could they could create a system of cross-border governance between American Port Angeles City and Victoria, the city of Victoria. That's the cross-border level. And you have the last slice of border is the border at the global level, like we have spoken in this seminar, with this deconstruction of the territorial limit, but the reconstruction of the legal interface between rights and laws. So the postmodern approach I develop in Borders in Globalization project is this conception of the border with this 5 or 6 slides who are able to give us a good information at the question of the start, what is border inside globalization. Thank you for for your attention, and thank you for having for being here with me, for sharing my ideas. But now we could share some questions, and I will put my my protection. So thank you very much.